Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce the beginning of our next panel, Art in East Anglia. So please take your seats. And I'm going to begin by introducing today's panelists, beginning with Amanda Geithner, who relocated from Australia to the UK to become the assistant curator of Mead Gallery in Warwick, and then in 1998 became the chief curator of the Sainsbury's Centre, a post she kept for 17 years. She is now the director of the East Anglia Art Fund in Norwich, the non-profit organization that stages world-class exhibitions and supports art projects all over the region. Julia Devonshire, next, is an artist, cultural producer, and co-founder of Original Projects, a cultural practice based in Great Yarmouth, seeking to invigorate the town and surrounding region by establishing innovative, artist-led projects. Most recently, Original Projects took a 20,000 square foot disused space, a bankrupt Debenhams, and has converted it into a working artist collective space. I believe it's still open. So now that lockdown has ended, I encourage all of you to go and visit it. Sally Shaw is the director of FirstSite in Colchester. Before that, she was chief curator for art on the Underground and deputy head of culture for the mayor of London. Under Sally's direction, FirstSite has become the leading contemporary art museum in East Anglia and one of the most influential public art institutions in the region. She was awarded an MBE in October last year after creating Art is Where the Home Is, an activity pack of art projects for children stuck at home during lockdown, downloaded more than now probably 100,000 households. During Sally's tenure, the museum has integrated itself with the local and regional community, bringing the museum closer to its full potential. So on that note, I am going to let the three panelists introduce themselves a little bit and also show some images of their institutions and their activities, and then we will head into the portion of the session dedicated to questions. So to begin, Amanda,
I think
please.
That's me. Hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for sitting to listen. It's really nice to be here. As Joan said, I'm Amanda Geitner, and my current role is as director of the East Anglia Art Fund. So the East Anglia Art Fund, not the Art Fund. We were, when that was still National Collections, we were the East Anglia Art Foundation, and I think we were renamed the East Anglia Art Fund about 3 weeks before the National Collections became the Art Fund, and confusion has reigned ever since. But we are a 30-year membership-based organisation that was originally, it grew out of an initiative that started with Merlin Waterson, Timothy Coleman, and Richard Jewson in conversation with Nick Sirota when he was director at the Tate, about a Tate in the East. And discussions went on for some time in the late 80s, early 90s about a Tate in the East, about the same time that Tates were being established in Liverpool and St Ives. And in the end, a group of people galvanised around this idea and eventually put their strength and their advocacy behind the refurbishment of Norwich Castle, which was subsequently completed in 2000. But out of that initial group, not only developed this membership group of the East Anglia Art Foundation, but really the pioneering and the first of the big Tate partnerships in the region, and a particular partnership with the Tate and Norwich Castle endures to this day. So come forward 30 years and we're now a membership organisation of between 650 and 700 people. And our members are all, I'd say, passionate art supporters, and they are largely focused in Norfolk and Suffolk, fewer members in Suffolk than in Norfolk, but growing in Suffolk each year. And we do things in a variety of scales. So our remit is to support art excellence in the region. And it grew out of a really simple conviction. And the conviction was, it's really nice for those of us who can go to London and see world-class fine art there. But many people don't. Many people in this region don't. And that we should live in a place and raise our children in a place where excellence in the visual arts happens where we are. So we support exhibitions in a larger scale at Norwich Castle, from Jeff Coombs to the current Passion for Landscape, John Crome, who's the founder of the Norwich School of Painters. And those exhibitions can attract people in their tens of thousands, up to 70 or 80,000. But from that scale, we also focus on the much smaller scale, which is one of the initiatives we've now run for sort of 10 years, is A-level masterclasses. And that's small amounts of funding to support students in their tens, maybe a dozen students, where we will pay for the supply teacher, pay for the coach, pay a really good artist fee for a really good artist, a very high caliber artist to spend a day with A-level students who are often based quite remotely in rural Norfolk or Suffolk and wouldn't have that experience otherwise. We were given, thank you for these slides, we were given in 2015 a very generous bequest from 2 artists based in Suffolk, Fred Dewberry and Joanne Brogden, and from that bequest we fund 7 scholarships in fine art and fashion at Norwich University for the Arts each year. So that's now in its 6th year, and that growing cohort of scholarship students has been just an absolute joy for us. Those images that we're looking at behind, I can introduce those. This is Daniel and Clara, who work as a team, and it's a film still from a work called The Island. Now, one of the things that we do to support artists in the region is to try and show their work and to encourage people to buy their work. So this is the 6th East Anglia Art Fund Open Art Show that's currently on show in the castle. We took our cue originally from the John Crome show and looking at artists' relationship in the landscape, but then we called it Somewhere Unexpected, and it focuses particularly on all of our relationships to our immediate landscapes through the pandemic. And there's 38 artists in that. That beautiful photograph is the studio wall of Anna Mack at the new space, the Art Station in Saxmundham, and their fantastic inaugural exhibition here. And if you haven't seen it, it is open till the 15th of August, and it's just a really excellent show. And one of the things that EVE does is, as well as giving bigger awards, we run a small grants programme that we award twice a year, and they're just for grants up to £1,000. And we were really proud to support the inaugural show at the Art Station, which was curated by Claire Palmier and Jane Watt. And I know £1,000 might sound like a really small amount of money, but actually in the visual arts and exhibitions, that can make the difference between a project happening or it not happening. And then finally, that's Craig Hudson, in front of Lizzie Sainsbury. So just to introduce myself a bit further, I also work as a kind of freelance curator, and it's funny that one show's called Somewhere Unexpected. That is, it's last day today, a show called Nowhere, which is up, it's the 20th anniversary Clyde North Norfolk exhibition show. And Craig is based in Suffolk, and he has work here, and I've worked with him quite a bit, and the work behind his is by Lizzie Sainsbury, who's based in Italy, and it's about a series of projects that were at the Cavallerizza Reale, the royal stables at Turin, about a series of projects called Here.
Amanda, on that note, I want to mention that we have a large-scale sculpture installation on the castle grounds, and that there will be a guided sculpture walk with the producer and curator of that, Adam Robinson, at 1:30 today. And meet at sculpture number 1 by Lawrence Edwards if you're interested to join. It's free and unticketed.
So that's really...
Including Craig Hudson, that's why I mentioned it.
And that's really all I need to say. That's our focus, trying to make excellent things happen here.
Okay, Julia, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Julia. I am currently one half of Original Projects with my partner, Carvies Clayton. So to give you a bit of background as to how we found ourselves in Great Yarmouth, we were graduates from Norwich School of Art and Design, recognised that there was no opportunity for graduating students to really stick around. The critical mass of artists was very minimal compared to what it was now. So we set up Outpost Gallery, which is an artist-led space in the heart of the city. And that was very much in response to the programme East International that used to come to Norwich every year, curated by Linda Morris, and took place within the art school building while it was empty of students, which is a fantastic opportunity to sort of come into contact with very ambitious international artists at various stages of their career, but also it was selected every year by 2 sort of big name curators specifically around their particular theme. So that allowed us into a bit of a world that we wouldn't necessarily have a view on. We set up Outpost Gallery based on the Transmission model. Transmission is based in Glasgow, and it was monthly shows with a membership, and then it sort of helped generate the scene, but also the community around it at the same time. So having had careers across the region, having to travel for arts jobs, actually, they're very difficult to come by. Carvies was based in Colchester, I was based in Ipswich for a while. And so kind of talking about scale and proximity, as yourself, we decided to sort of bring all of our experience to bear into Great Yarmouth, kind of thinking, well, we could establish ourselves somewhere else, like where there is a thriving art scene already, and actually kind of thinking, well, why would we do that at our time of life? But when we can go somewhere and live cheaply by the sea and actually kind of just sort of start from scratch almost a little bit. I mean, I had a small time there when I was a kid. My dad had worked in the area. So it felt like it was on our doorstep, but it was far enough away for it to be new and different. So we sort of engaged in a bit of action research funded by the Arts Council called Eastern Prospects, which kind of gave us a chance to sort of get to grips with the place, make friends and influence people on the ground, to bring them into our story, travel around the country, find models that we admired that were similar to what we would like to have done in place. And sort of brought that into bear. And we sort of used the term edging further to being closer away, which is kind of a nice way of kind of positioning yourself in somewhere that perhaps doesn't have a scene. So, I mean, sort of wanting to use Ryan Gander's image to illustrate the point around scale. This was the public artwork that we commissioned called 1/12, which was in the model village on the seafront. So all model villages in the UK are 1/12 scale. I don't know if you know that, but in Europe, they are metric. So that was a really nice way for us to kind of like play with the place and bring people into our journey and kind of work with some ambitious artists, but in a way that was quite manageable. I mean, that's just one project. We landed at a time when there was a project called Making Waves Together, which was part of the Great Place scheme that Historic England and the Arts Council had funded a number of 16 places across the UK to engage in this placemaking work. And working with communities to help around community regeneration through culture. So that provided us with 3 years' worth of funding to resource something we called Great Yarmouth Expo. So it was a way of us getting right under the skin of the place and getting to know the heritage, the communities, the industries that were there to kind of tell a story. So basically what I'd like to use the harmonic slide for, this is an annual festival around sonic art and music that we host, is we make the place the hero in everything we do. So this is an example of one project, but it's a day-long festival with interventions on the hour, every hour, with sonic artists working with places. So this is in the sea. There we have started on the jetty. We had Evan Parker one day open, again, bringing big names to Great Yarmouth. And then the Hippodrome. We have got some amazing built architecture, seaside architecture, but also like some hidden and overlooked places that we like to sort of bring to people's attention. So that happens in September every year, thinking about our seasonality and trying to sort of add something to the end of what would be traditionally that 8-week period where we get an influx of tourists, but actually broadening the cultural tourist offer as well. So it takes me on to the next slide. So part of our sort of work is recognising like there aren't many people like us in the town, yet one of the things that we felt was necessary is to sort of reuse spaces. We've done this before with Outpost Studios. We occupy an old office block in Anglia Square, if anyone's familiar with it. Carvus had worked on the bus station in Colchester, the waiting room. So occupying these buildings on a meanwhile use kind of provides a regenerative hook for bringing communities into your story as part, as a contemporary art offer, but perhaps communities that have never encountered art before, but also creating a sort of physical hub is really useful for sort of maintaining that contact. Otherwise, you are relentlessly programming back to back, just so you don't lose people along the way. So we've had a few buildings in the past. We've had some smaller units. One we still have. It's occupied by artists and studios. We were able to access a Marks and Spencer's for a 6-month period, which was great because it's town centre, footfall directly from the street. People who were curious, who'd bought their vegetables or pants there. It was great. It was great. And it was a huge scale. And it was also, we were able to scale up and invite more artists in to exhibit at the same time because that also brings critical mass of people to the space and people can show alongside professional artists. So more recently, we have taken on this old Debenhams. This is the first floor. We've currently got 2 exhibitions on at the moment. This is a group show with Desmond Brett, Chloe Steele, and Rob Philby. This is Desmond Brett's work. Oh my goodness! And Rob Philby's work. And we've also got a double-headed coin curated by Scott Robinson, which is another excellent way of sort of like reaching out to the arts community with a ready-made group show. Brings a few people to present in our town, but also brings their audience and footfall. But then we can present it alongside things like holiday fun activities.
Sure.
And we also host ESOL lessons and stuff like that. So
Actually, I'm going to break from the format of just giving them an expository paragraph or page, but because I think it's important to interject when there's an obvious, relevant question. So what is the funding required to convert a disused commercial building in the center of town or a municipal building into a collective space so that it can be sustainable?
Yeah.
Based on your Debenham's experience. And I wish there was somebody from the Town Council of Sudbury or Colchester here to witness this conversation, but luckily it's being taped right now. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to convene this meeting, or this panel, because I think that in the wake of COVID, the number of bankruptcies among retail outlets makes it incumbent on us to investigate new business models which could possibly implant themselves in towns like Sudbury and then invigorate the art and culture scene. So how much would that cost, actually, and how did you finance it? And is it self-sustaining?
Very much a work in progress. I mean, we're figuring it out as we go. We have residence artists using a studio space on the second floor. We also provide sort of space for rentals for various activities, community organisations, that sort of thing. And thankfully, we've been able to sort of achieve some COVID recovery funding as well. I mean, the only cost to us, actually, is the electricity bill.
Okay, so it's relatively fully fitted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually it's a derisory sum. It's really the utilities only, which make it a very attractive potential gallery and collective space.
It's sort of on the premise that we're a charity as well, so we actually do the landlord a favour by resolving them of their building tax,
Right.
their rates, that sort of thing. So they get 80% of their tax, their rates cut. They then pay the 20%, but us being in there is doing them a favour. Other organisations use that 20% to then pull back into their core funding. So East Street Arts in Leeds have also used that model, and that's where we look to for that kind of advice, really.
Okay. Sally, on that note, I'd like you to introduce yourself, but Sally is also notable because she has been integrating the museum's activities into the community very regularly, and that's a different way of invigorating the art and cultural scene. So on that note, Sally, please introduce yourself.
Thanks everyone, it's really nice to be here. I'm Sally, I'm the Director of FirstSite in Colchester. I actually just wanted to start by thanking the panellists in the earlier talk about agriculture and regeneration. I think you could have swapped the word art in there quite handily and had a similar discussion. I found it completely inspiring. It was really, really fascinating. It was really brilliant. We can go home now.
Thank you.
The two words I heard most in that talk, which I think about a lot, are regeneration and resilience. So FirstSite is in Colchester. We were opened 10 years ago, and we were built as a regeneration project. But FirstSite, for those of you who know it, has been on a bit of a journey as an art gallery. I knew about FirstSite before I worked there. I started 5 years ago, and I knew about it for all of the bad reasons that you've probably heard about the gallery. It was the regeneration project in the heart of a town centre like Colchester, but actually what had happened was that they built an art gallery by removing the bus station. And actually the bus station was previously the heart of the community for many people. It's where lots and lots of people gathered on a daily basis. So to take that centre out of the town was a major problem. And then to replace that centre with a gold banana-shaped art gallery was just an extraordinary situation. The gallery was very late, it cost a lot of money, it was very over budget, and it was incredibly unpopular by the time it finally opened. So it was in a very difficult place from day one, really. They had a very successful few years to start with, did an amazing set of exhibitions and opening programme. But then what gradually happened was that audiences became disassociated from the gallery because of this original problem, the problem of what is the heart of this town, what is the heart of the community. And they'd really kind of lost that idea, I think. So I arrived in 2016, and at that point the gallery was removed from the Arts Council's national portfolio, so its core funding had been taken away, it had been put into special measures. The audiences were down to about 80,000 from about 150,000 at its highest. It was in the newspapers for all the wrong reasons every day, pretty much. And my job was to sort that out.
Well done.
Thanks. I started my career as an artist, actually, and I was always wanting to work not in art galleries. I had some really appalling experiences in art galleries at a very early stage in my career, One of them was Modern Art Oxford, where I went back to work as head of programme before going to FirstSite. But I always felt that art galleries were these places that weren't for me. And that was a really strange feeling as an art student, and I always felt quite intimidated. I came from a small town, not unlike Colchester, not an amazing school, you know, not particularly prominent school background or anything like that. So I always felt like these art galleries were for other people, not for me, but I was desperate to be an artist. My mum was an art teacher, and I was desperate to be part of this community and to be creative. So my career actually took me into all sorts of other places doing art. So I worked in an open prison for a long time. I worked for the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, on his Fourth Plinth programme and throughout the Olympics. And I worked for London Underground because I was interested in taking art to places where there were millions of other people who also don't see art galleries as places for them. Because everybody has an opinion on art. Whether it's a good one or a bad one, everyone has something to say about it. And art and culture is absolutely a fundamental part of our daily lives. But we've been encouraged to not think like that, to not take creativity seriously. If you think about everything that was talked about in this morning's presentation, all those solutions are based on creativity. Somebody said the word reimagining earlier on. That's all art is. It's a process of reimagining everything. And if we could all do a little bit more of that, we'd probably find ourselves in a very better place. And this idea of resilience might look completely different. So my project with FirstSite has been to try to reinstate that idea of what art and creativity can be. And I went there because it was in a difficult place and because the list of problems around this art gallery was so long. I thought, I know I can smash all those problems. I know I can take creativity into that place and I can use it as the thing that will turn it around. And I know I can do that in a really unusual way. People complained that there were no straight walls at FirstSite. It's a crazy building. It's absolutely fantastic. But that weird-shaped building forces us to have weird-shaped ideas. And this is a climate for weird-shaped ideas, if ever I've felt like it. This is the time to think wonky thoughts, because all of those other thoughts didn't really work very well. And we've all just experienced how catastrophic that can be for everybody. So my project with FirstSite is to take those problems and turn them inside out. Bruce Snowman is an amazing American artist. He says, inside the heart of every problem lies the solution. And it's an extraordinarily creative way to think. Inside all these problems, we have the materials for everything to be completely different. We have everything already at our fingertips to think and be completely different. The problem is we're choosing not to, because actually the situation that we find ourselves in now, ridiculously, is more comfortable than perhaps that change might be to make. But we have to make those changes and we have to go through that discomfort. And art galleries are brilliant places for trying out weird things. So with FirstSite, it had no audience, it had no sense of purpose, it had no money, had no community around it. So I took all of those things and I thought, right, well, I'll start with that. And I went and met all of the community leaders in Colchester. I didn't know Colchester as a town myself at all, so I wanted to go and find out, what is this place like? What does it feel like to live and work in Colchester? What are the problems that Colchester is facing? And what can I do with this enormous building and the little resources that I do have to create some change? One of the first people I met was an incredible woman called Rachel Walton from African Families in the UK. And we had a little bit of money to do an exhibition with Lubaina Himid, who went on to win the Turner Prize in 2017 because of the exhibition that we did with her. We had £2,000 to work with black and minority ethnic communities in Colchester. So I went to Rachel and said, what's happening? What can we do together? And the first thing that she told me about was holiday hunger, which you've talked about a little bit. And I had no clue what this meant. I thought it was people not getting enough holidays. That's how totally naive I was. Rachel explained what holiday hunger is. And I then looked into the data around Colchester and its children and young people. 25% of children and young people in Colchester prior to COVID were living below the poverty line. It's anticipated that that may have gone up as much as 10 to 15% during COVID. So Rachel told me about this problem, and at the time we were sitting in my restaurant, which I'd had to shut. On day one of being at FirstSite, it was one of the first things I had to do was close the restaurant. The restaurant was meant to be a lobster restaurant at the back end of the gallery. So thinking about this morning's discussion and being how far away from your local truth, that was the local truth of Colchester and FirstSite. Meant to be a lobster restaurant. I shut it. It was losing me £40,000 a year. And I said to Rachel, right, we're going to open a school canteen. And she was like, "What the heck are you on about, lady?
Wow.
What are you on about?" And we
Wow.
just did. We took the £2,000. We borrowed some dinner ladies from local schools, and we set up a school canteen. And that school canteen has now been running every school holiday for the last 4 years. We're just about to. Thanks.
Yeah. Wow, that is incredible.
So we've just served our 9,000th free meal, which is not a statistic I like at all. Half those meals were provided in the last 18 months. That increase has gone up absolutely phenomenally over the last 18 months. But one of the reasons I do this, not just because people need food, because they do, but actually what happens is that very new families come into our building, and these are families who've never been into an art gallery or a museum or a library, some of them ever before. And they come in for a meal to start with, and we provide free sport, so they get running around, they get their blood moving around their bodies, they get their brains going. They have a free meal, they sit with their families and eat together. Often that doesn't happen. And by the time you've done those two things, you've had a bit of a run around, you've had some food, you're in the right state of mind to do something different. And you can see these little minds just kind of opening up, and you can see their parents relaxing for the first time in a week. And then they go off and they wander around the art gallery, and they see the most weird and wonderful things, and you see their lives changing in front of you, and it's the most incredible feeling. So that's one of the projects that we do. The other main project that we've been running for the last 2.5 years is the Arts Council Collection Programme. We won the opportunity to work with the Arts Council's national collection, which is 8,000 artworks. We won that opportunity alongside Newlyn and Sunderland because we said that we would co-curate every single exhibition that we produced in that programme. The Arts Council's collection is only available to a very small number of people, and I wanted to give it to everybody. So we've been co-curating every single exhibition. That's three exhibitions every year with a different community group. And we hand over this entire collection to very, very different people. The first exhibition was with a group called Super Black. The first question that they asked me of the Arts Council's national collection is, can you send me a list of all the black artists in that collection? And I had to say no, because the national collection isn't categorised in that way at all. The second group of people that I worked with was a group called the Radical Women of Colchester. They asked me to send them a list of all the female artists in the Arts Council's collection, and I couldn't do that either, which says a lot about the world of collections and museums and who they're for and how they're structured and how much change there is to be made. So all of those exhibitions, we've done about 8 now, have been co-curated with different people from the community, and it's completely and utterly dissolved the walls of our gallery. We have so many different people coming into the building now. Our audience figures have doubled in the last 2 years, including with COVID. Through COVID, we produced our Artists Wear the Home activity packs because we just did the reverse. You can't come in, so we'll go to you, we'll send everything out. But this is the point about creativity. This is what makes the difference, and this is what regeneration is. This is what you guys do, is you see a problem and you flip it, and you use creativity, you use your imagination, and things start to happen, things start to move, and people stick to that, and it creates an incredible energy. This is what the agriculture conversation was about this morning. It's about movement and energy.
Well, actually, on that note, because it was really inspiring, Sally. I mean, it just incredibly how resourceful and just dynamic Sally has been. I want to ask Amanda and Julia also, on a very optimistic note. I mean, if you could reimagine, let's say, from the basis of your many years of experience as an arts administrator and now project producer, Julia or Amanda, with your many years of experience in East Anglia, how would you reimagine what you're doing under the aegis of your current organization? Like in your dream project, in order to advance its mission more effectively, what would you like to do? Like in the vein of what, some of the projects perhaps Sally's been describing, using more technology or funding to deploy in different ways than presently, or whatever, as an open brainstorm.
Sorry, I'm going to answer your question, and I'm also struggling to step on in my head because I'm still in that conversation. So I am going to answer your question, but I did want to say that, I've thought a lot in the last couple of years about Jacinta Ardern. I'm not a New Zealander, I'm Australian, but like all Australians, I'd like to be a New Zealander. And Jacinta Ardern once said, that her government was characterised by kindness, and kindness isn't an airy-fairy word, nor is compassion. And I think there's enormous kindness and compassion in both your programs. And Jules said something on the way down. Julia, I'm using your diminutive, is that we don't talk audiences. We talk people whose names we know.
Yeah.
There is no unquantifiable random audience, and I think there are people we know, people in our community, people whose children we get to know, and I know most of my members, and you don't ever just talk about audience. There are groups you work with and people you know and people you collaborate with, and I think that's incredibly important, obvious and yet incredibly important, because of course funding and government structures and larger institutions are often talking about far horizons and audiences, not people who come, people who know, and people whose lives can be changed. And I think you showing that great remit between an art gallery can be a great place for those of us who feel comfortable to spend a nice Sunday afternoon, and we all want to live somewhere that when relatives and friends visit from somewhere else, we can take them somewhere really great and show them, look, great things happen here too. But actually, that's lovely for those tens of thousands of people, but you can actually change one young person's life. And it's not about footfall, it's about individual impacts. So I think that then leads me to my question, what would I reimagine? I would not reimagine that my organisation or any organisation can step in and just fix. I think the arts are often called upon to fix everybody's problems when things go horribly wrong. Like, look, there's all these empty buildings. You guys fix it. You guys do something. But what they can do is engage very, very, very personally with people and talk to and acknowledge the phenomenal creativity that already exists in our organisations. In our communities and people working around us. So this idea of co-curating, I think, is a fabulous reimagining, because there's people there who already have things that they care passionately about, and artists tend to make work that they care passionately about, and those themes will chime with one another and illustrate and draw on those conversations. So a reimagining. With lots of our recent exhibitions, what I'm starting to find is that I think we were founded by people who felt at the time, and it was lots of people's conviction, that really great art came from somewhere else. So actually one of our straplines, embarrassingly enough, was for a long time bringing great art to the region, because it ain't here. we got to bring it up the A11 or up the A14. It's got to come in trucks. And that's not the case anymore. Of the key exhibitions that we've given specialist funding to for the last 3 years, one was many of them were historic. So we don't just work with the contemporary visual arts. One was about the Paston treasure. One of a key work of the 17th century. There's the John Crome, and then there was the Zaybold, the W.G. Zaybold exhibition, which was called Lines of Sight, which was revealing. It was a UEA collaboration, a collaboration with Calvin Winner, who I think is in the tent here today at the Sainsbury Centre. And it was interesting because the great art wasn't being brought to our region, it was in our region, and we were doing things that were fundamentally local and simultaneously of international significance. So it was, that's what I would do. In the reimagining, we called the show up on North Norfolk Coast Nowhere, because nowhere is an endlessly disparaging term. We live in the middle of nowhere. We're getting nowhere with this. We are nowhere near a resolution. But actually, there's lots of places called nowhere. It's an impossibility. You can't be nowhere. But nowhere is a composite word that actually is now here. And I think that idea of just focusing on the now here, just as you did, what is the need now here? Where are the spaces now here? Who's working now here? You're not nowhere at all. You're now here, and it's somewhere really important suddenly to lots of people. Did I answer your question? I just ran.
No, you did.
Just had a bit of a rant.
It was both elliptical and compelling. But I want to, excuse me, ask you also, don't worry, I don't have COVID. It's because I slept 3 hours in the last 2 days. But anyway, explaining my sexy, gravelly voice. But I wanted to ask, is that actually the reason that you decided to move from the Sainsbury Centre to East Anglia Art Fund, because of the now here?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to, also talk, and then Because Amanda's literally also the art industry professional with the longest experience of the region.
Oh.
In that process, also, like, just quickly, if it's possible.
And she's Australian.
Give a capsule overview of the history of the East Anglian art scene. I mean, that's a ridiculous question.
Well, when
but
you said I was at the Sainsbury Centre for 17 years, I wanted to interject and say I went as a child. I was only a child. I was only a child. But actually, I arrived in '98, and because I've been watching a lot of the Olympics this week, I remember arriving and saying to my family, I'll be back in time for the Sydney Olympics. I was doing that typical from somewhere else. I arrived in England in the mid-90s. It was all happening here. You know, it was all sensation and Britpop, and it was all happening, and I wanted to pick up a couple of professional experiences. I actually came on an Arts Council and Australia Council funded exchange with Victoria Pomeroy, who's now done amazing things at Turner Contemporary. So I was, as you are when you're first starting out in your mid-20s, I was being quite clear and ambitious about the sort of range of experience I wanted to get, that I was then going to take what I was still calling home. And I arrived in Norwich in '98, and somebody said to me, "This is the graveyard of ambition. You will never want to leave." And graveyard of ambition is so like Norfolk and Suffolk. Have you ever heard the expression suffocation? But it's like Norfolk being the graveyard of ambition. It's this idea that we're very, very negative about the fact that no one wants to leave, without celebrating the fact that you don't want to leave because it's so amazing here. And I loved the Sainsbury Centre, and it was amazing. It was like the world in Norfolk, and it took me all over the world. And I think what it does for our arts ecology is give this incredible international perspective. But then suddenly I was raising children, and I was going, they were in primary school, and I realised that I'd looked at Far Horizons for a long time, and it was about drilling down, about putting down roots, and about being really interested. If somebody had said to me at the beginning as a curator, like you say about artists, how about you arrange members' events and ask for money? I would have thought that just sounded like hell. And that's the one thing as a curator. Once the doors open to the public, you kind of want to disappear. You've done your bit. You've arranged it all beautifully, and you want to go away. But actually, I've really enjoyed talking to people, arranging events, and asking for money, because I wanted to step out of arranging things in spaces and move towards the people who are coming to see it or wanting it to happen, or looking at things that artists here wanted to happen, to see how we could help that happen for them. So, yeah, it was absolutely about kind of drilling down and acknowledging, actually, I am home.
Now, I want Julia to answer that question about the reimagining. Please.
I find this really hard. I think, we're a small organisation, so...
Or I have a better way to frame the question, because when I spoke to you before and prepared for this talk when we first met, Julie has long-time experience as a municipal arts administrator, and she butted up against many obstacles during her career, which eventually led her to establish her own organization. So what would you change about the arts ecology, the funding, the vetting processes of getting grants? Like, what could be like the linchpin of success, or what's the reason for failure all too often?
Well, I think we're a small organisation. We don't have national portfolio funding. We go from a project-to-project basis. There are pros and cons with both. I don't think that the MPO in our area does trickle those funds down to
what
our
is
organisation. A national portfolio organisation.
Okay.
So I would say some are successful. I think FirstSite is an exception. I would probably get rid of NPOs. That would be good. I also think that...
with the exception of FirstSite.
with the exception of... with the exception, of course. No, I just think something around... we always just need to think long term. A lot of what we're doing is about building trust with our communities, and actually trying to learn the language at the same time about communicating upwards to perhaps, like an authority that might just understand economic development terms, when actually economic development is saving money on the health service, social welfare of our communities, feeding our kids. It's not about bringing the tourist pounds in for those 8 months a year and trying to make the season as long as it possibly can be. How does that speak to local people year round? And it's just making sure that those funding cycles perhaps do bring people along with the journey, or trying to sort of facilitate, like maybe freelancers and the grassroots artists and organisations that are working 24 hours a day in their place. Well, you know, you don't switch off at 5 o'clock because you're an artist. You sort of, you live the place. You need, people are people, they're not audiences. They can be participants, they can be, but it's also, you know, you are amongst that community. So it's that sort of thinking long term about what can be done, and then sort of being on that journey without having to justify things constantly as to why you are doing it and what the outcomes are. Everything's very outcome heavy, and it needs to be things that can be measured, when actually having faith in the process would be a gift, because actually I think artists and creatives are really responsible about public money and resourceful with where that goes, and that can go deep into the communities as well, and be, you know, if we are getting paid properly as well, we're spending it locally. So it's sort of like we can be, I don't know, I don't want to be like leaders, you know, cultural leaders being sort of showing, demonstrating a way of living that is, you know, least impact to the planet, but most impactful to the place that you're in. And I think that would be really useful for us. I mean, recently, I don't know, there's lots of money coming from central government that needs to be spent tomorrow, and vast sums of money that don't necessarily, they're sort of going into those big agendas like skills, regeneration, employment, which is brilliant. But if you join the dots properly, and it was talked about earlier, it was about, well, I can't remember, it was optimising rather than maximising. Yeah. And that's it. It can go really far and really deep if you sort of network those opportunities better and take the egos out of it, because I think that doesn't help. I sort of speak of being in a small place where that dilution perhaps isn't present, where you can butt up against people, and if it doesn't go well, then you're sort of, you know, you just have to do your own thing. Therefore, you know, in our instance, we have to sort of look out further afield and sort of bring our partnerships from elsewhere. But I don't know, I think there's something about thinking long term, and being in and of the place is really important to us.
How much of your time is spent on funding applications or auditing your operation in order to fulfill criteria?
Yeah, probably not enough, actually. We probably could be doing more of that, but only because there's just two of us, so we're quite hand-to-mouth. But if we were going for those more substantial funds, which we're ready for now, that's when that comes in. But then you would grow your team, so it's about growing capacity at the same time.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that, anyway, just quickly, I'm going to make an observation. I mean, from living here for the last 5 years, I mean, if Arts Council funding was yanked, this is a question too, would all of the, how much of the art industry would just go defunct overnight? You don't try to give me an accurate answer.
Well, I can't. I don't think I can. We actually did quite a lot of scenario planning last year because of COVID, and I didn't force our board, but I really encouraged the board of trustees to think in that direction, because it's only when things are going disastrously wrong that we start to actually want to have these big thoughts that could make a big difference. And it's like we wait until it's knackered to actually then change it. Yeah. But we shouldn't. We should be having those thoughts now. Yeah. And, you know, at the moment, Arts Council give me £830,000 a year, and that's the biggest chunk of funding that I get. If that disappeared, I need an £830,000 a year shaped solution. Right. But actually that got us thinking about really big ideas, and it created a very exciting discussion about how different we could be. And actually, you know, why not create a solar power field around the gallery to provide our own energy, but also the energy for the school next door? You know, that sort of thing popped out of it. Amazing. So I think we need to stare into those big black holes, because, like I was trying to say earlier on, in those big black holes there are really bright diamond ideas, and we need them. We need to think so differently. Our main problem is probably complacency. You know, we could change most things right now if we really wanted to, but we clearly don't really want to, you know.
Okay, well, EA Festival to the rescue.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, I want to take 3 questions from the audience and then choose one of them, unless all 3 can be answered in a single answer. If anybody has questions, because we started a little behind today because of the traffic problem on A131. So please, a question over here.
Yes, Emma Judd. Emma Judd. got a couple of questions actually, but
Please.
one is a very short one, which is I think your programming, the East Anglian art programming, is very interesting, and I'm constantly wanting to go to your exhibitions, but Norwich is quite a hike from me. I live on the Essex-Suffolk borders. Is there any chance that you could actually bring some of your programming further into Suffolk, or even to Colchester, to FirstSite, or to Christchurch Gallery?
Got it nailed.
Because you've got it there.
We're planning to work together.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
We'll sort that in coffee.
We are literally.
That would be fabulous. But I think it's wonderful to see three women on this panel who obviously do bring a fascinating approach to curatorship. And I just wondered, having listened to what you were saying, do you think that being women, your approach to being curators is different to how it might have been in the past, and whether you bring,
Maybe
a
consider
different
being a man.
ethos?
Wait, don't answer yet. Okay, are there any other questions? No? Okay, so go ahead.
I've never been a man, so I don't know.
That was a very diplomatic answer, Sally. That was too diplomatic.
I would say that, I mean, I was offered the job for FirstSite when I was on maternity leave, my first and only child. And my previous boss said to me, "Oh, you can't do that, you've just had a baby." And I was like, oh my God, I'm gone, I'm out. You know, it was the red rag to a bull. I've never felt more energetic than at that moment, having just kind of, it sounds very hippyish, but created this human being. It makes an awful lot of things become incredibly clear very, very quickly. And I just wanted to put that energy into trying to make things, really selfishly, for my child better, because everything that we're doing at the moment is making a lot of stuff quite a lot worse. So it's a very powerful way to think and work. And I do think perhaps I am going to open a can of worms here. I think perhaps women think more horizontally, perhaps. We've hosted a lot of events specifically for women and community leaders especially. And the amount of times I hear about the conversation around sharing what we have, whatever that is, even if it's just a small meal or something, it's always about, you can have half immediately. And I think that's an economics. I think if culturally we started to work more horizontally rather than this vertical model, which again came up this morning, it was about build, maximising. If we started to share, everything I've done has been almost to try and get rid of the money that I get. It's like, how can I just farm that out as fast as I can? Because every time I do that, it comes back in an even bigger wave, but in a completely different way. And it comes with warmth, and it comes with connection, and it comes with other forms of generosity. And it's a very hopeful and positive way to work.
Would either of you like to contribute to that?
All of that.
Yeah, all of that.
All of that.
Okay.
All of that.
My circumstances sort of forced me to be in the region, really. I had a child very young and couldn't have that kind of London experience, go and travel the world and become a sort of, study in the best places or anything like that. So that was a real driver, actually, being in a place where there was no real cultural infrastructure, and sort of like using that as a bit of a kind of creates that fire a little bit to kind of prove that I can do this in a place where there's nothing, and that's fine. And I think the conviviality bit is really important, and how we kind of how we as women. I mean, have you met my boyfriend? He is actually sort of half woman as well.
Are you in this audience now? Stand up, Amanda.
No, I mean, in terms of that sort of sensibility and the principles around generosity, I think they are very much embedded in what we do anyway. So I don't know whether that's because of my female attributes or whether it's not. But anyway,
Amanda.
Well, I was going to say, in answer to the first part of your question, yes, we need to think about our bigger projects in Suffolk, but we have supported it in the last few years. Thinking about the green agenda, in my interview for my job, everybody leant forward and said, "And how can you get into Suffolk?" And I took a long breath, and I kept thinking, don't say by train or car, don't say by train or car, because the immediate thing would be a drive. But actually, I do spend a lot of time in Suffolk, and we've supported projects. We supported for 3 years Jason Gathorne Hardy's project at the All Valley Festival, and have supported projects at the Cut and this one in Saxmundham. So it's where our small grants have gone. But yes, bigger projects we need to think about. But interesting, thinking about the Old Valley Festival and Jason Gathon Hardy's, one of the things that I don't think Sally did say, but one of your colleagues told me about that I found really inspiring visiting FirstSite was, you know, how you start by doing this and then you can do that and that. So my understanding is with the meals that you provide to address holiday hunger, but they're not the same as the school meals. So they have a cultural relationship to the people who come and get them. And one of the things that does is it revalidates and reflects back to those children their home culture, that what they're fed at home or what their grandmother cooks isn't weird, and it's not niche, and it's not strange, and they share it with their other school friends. This is my grandmother's from here, and we eat this sort of thing all the time. And so that you can take small things and build them out culturally. And I think, and once you start doing something, it's a virtuous circle. It gains its own momentum. So start with generosity, and generosity has a way of snowballing. And I see that in my members. The membership is really affordable. It's £25 a year or £40 for a couple. You should all become members. The leaflets are out there.
Yes, it's very
That's
affordable.
what I've learned to do. They're very affordable.
No excuse.
But it's not about massive personal philanthropy. It's about small gifts, small contributions, going to see things, supporting people, buying an artwork when you can, applauding someone's exhibition, turning up at the talk. It's about just being engaged, and I don't know if that's I don't think it's a female thing. I think it's just part of loving living here and wanting it to be as good a place to be to live for all of us. When we were founded, one of the convictions was as well that it's not just that a nice warm feeling. It was founded on the convictions that economies thrive, and one of the key indicators of a thriving economy is a vibrant cultural life. You can't have one without the other.
Absolutely. And on that note, I also want to say that we have a fantastic art exhibition located in the Keep, right across from the house, of leading East Anglian artists. And at least one of them is supported by the East Anglian Art Fund. And I discovered that artist specifically through Amanda. So on that note, thank you to our panel. It was a fantastic and uplifting discussion. Yeah.
May we just also, since we're applauding, it is actually really significant for Sally and for the region that it was announced, I think last week or the week before, that FirstSite has been shortlisted for Museum of the Year. And to achieve that shortlist,
that is amazing.
To achieve that shortlist
Wow.
at the end of a pandemic says that you have really, really been doing something special. As have you, Jules, but Museum of the Year deserves some round of applause.
Wow, that is incredible.